Good evening and welcome one and all to the first meeting of this new Finance and Public Services Overview and Scrutiny panel. Pleased to see everybody here, and we have two Cabinet members in attendance as well. Thank you. To begin with, we have evacuation procedure, item 1, a fire drill. Item number 2, apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Phillips and Councillor Tracy Shepherd, and Councillor Jill Shepherd is a substitute for Councillor Tracy Shepherd. And Jane Sargent as well, Chair. And Councillor Kandaka is a substitute, Chair.
Thank you. So we move on to item number 3, which is the minutes. In this instance, we're here to confirm the minutes of the internal overview and scrutiny panel meeting held on the 18th of March 2021 that are actually relevant to the duties of this panel, as we appreciate this is a new panel and the duties are not exactly the same. So I'm simply asking for approval of the parts of the minutes that are relevant to this panel. Anybody in a position to propose them? Councillor Kenner, Councillor Condacor, are you happy to second them? You put your hand up.
Yeah, I was actually at the meeting, so I'm happy to second.
Thank you. And now that I've mastered the art of signing my name on a piece of paper, we can move on to item 4, which is the declarations of interest. Right, okay, so I've got Councillor Condacor, I think, indicated first. Councillor?
UK Limited.
Deputy Chairman, Association Deputy Chairman, Political.
Councillor Kenner.
Of amendments to my declarations of interest, but officers are aware and they'll be published in the future in the right reports. Thank you.
That being the case, can we move on to item number...
Sorry, Chair, Councillor Shepherd.
Councillor Shepherd.
I think it's because we had the same issue with planning, and it was indicating that I wasn't seen. So I don't know whether we all need to move down one chair. That's another meeting. My declarations of interest: the mental health chair of the mental health drop-in, director of Borough Community Centre, and a partnership member of Hilltop and Big Local.
Okay. Moving on then to item number 5, public consultation. Do we have any indication of anybody that wishes to speak? No. Thank you. In which case, we can move on to item 6, questions to Cabinet. In accordance with overview and scrutiny procedure, Rule 4E8C, we've set aside 20 minutes for questions to members of Cabinet relevant to this panel, so that councillors can raise questions to them in respect of things that are relevant to this panel. Thank you. And I'm very pleased to see that we've got councillors Croft and Evans here ready to take your questions. Any member? Councillor Condacor.
It's great to be able to ask Cabinet members questions. On the bin collections, we have an issue with Wednesday collections because of all the extra housing being built in Wellington St Nicholas. The previous council administration said they were going to rebalance the rounds, but never did. Do you know where we are with rebalancing the rounds? So that the Wednesday round is got some houses taken off to balance it out, because residents keep getting missed out on Wednesdays, which is not acceptable. And I believe it's been a long-standing aim to rebalance the rounds, so each round had roughly the same number of houses, but it's never been done. So if Councillor Evans could update us on that, would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Evans, would you like to respond?
Councillor Kondaka, you raise a fair question. Obviously, we have an adopted borough plan in Nuneaton and Bedworth, and we are, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, due to the decisions made by the last Labour Council, we are going to see an increase in housing in Nuneaton, Bedworth and Bulkington. It's only right that we look towards making sure that we have the adequate resources in place to make sure that our refuse department has the ability to collect bins for new houses. In the case of Weddington and St Nicholas Park, if you can give me the specific streets or the specific estate you're referring to, for example, Lower Farm, I presume that's the estate in question, I will happily take that away. But in relation to your question about having a review of the routes, that is currently being done. I've asked that to be done by the end of the summer, and when that's completed, I will give that to members to scrutinise, and that's something that I may, through you, Chair, perhaps bring through this committee for members to have the opportunity to scrutinise. But yes, it's definitely being done, and I've asked that to be done by the end of the summer.
Houses that aren't getting not done, because obviously the cumulative number of houses that went to St Nicholas has increased by 2,000. So quite often it's the existing houses that aren't getting collected, and it varies between day and day which bits get missed out. But cumulatively there are 2,000 more houses, and the routes can't cope with that addition. Thank you, Chair.
Servants.
I get what you're saying. It's going to be varied by the week, but if you do have casework coming through from residents, if you could perhaps make me aware of that so I've got a clearer picture in my head as to where this specific location is, that would be really helpful.
Councillor Kenno.
Thank you, Chair. This question is for Councillor Evans. So over the last year, and in particular recent months, there's been two things that have been in public focus, and that's public health and public safety. On the point of public safety, what is being done to improve licensing procedures, particularly to do with safeguarding? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Kenner raises an important point, especially about safeguarding, because we have, unfortunately, we've had to read those reports in the press and through these committees in the past about some of the failings of local authorities elsewhere in the UK when it comes to the child sexual exploitation scandal in the north of England and other local authorities as well. As the Cabinet Member for Public Services, I am responsible for the licensing department, and I take safeguarding very seriously. At present, we do provide safeguarding training for authority, and that training is carried out in conjunction with the NSPCC. However, I personally believe that we have to go one step further, and that is why I've asked for safeguarding tests to be introduced for applicants to this authority. I think that's the right decision. My priority and the priority of the new council is to make sure that our local residents are kept safe, and that is what we will do. We're also going to be introducing English language tests as well, because I think it's paramount that our taxi drivers have the ability to communicate effectively with our residents who use taxis, and I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know.
Councillor Beetham.
Cabinet Member for Public Service. Residents have been telling me that upon moving into Kingswood and the Borough, compared to other councils that they've moved from, recycling is needlessly complicated compared to how it was where they previously lived. What can or what will the council do to help residents do their bit for the environment?
Councillor Evans.
That Councillor Beetham makes, particularly about new people coming in from outside the borough. So the council has become part of the submaterials recycling facility scheme. We're one of several local authorities in the region to sign up to that scheme. Most Warwickshire districts have signed up, and Coventry City Council have signed up as well. As part of that, well, at the moment, we are not a commingled council. So at the moment, our residents, when recycling in the brown bin, they will separate their cardboard, newspapers, paper with their plastics. What we would probably have to do as part of the MRF project is go over to commingled collections. That is where everyone shoves it into a bin, it's all mixed. And the reason for that is because our neighbouring authorities are already commingled. So when you say that local residents are moving into the borough and they're finding it more complicated to recycle, I can sort of understand why. So as part of the MRF project, we will be given the opportunity to go to commingled recycling, and as the Cabinet Member, I'm quite open to that idea. If members of this committee have a different view on the matter, I'd be happy to hear that. But I think that would go some way in making it easier for people to recycle in the borough.
Councillor Shepherd.
Do you comment in terms of licensing and safeguarding, which is very important to this borough? Can I ask where the money is going to come from to do the safeguarding training? Are you expecting taxi drivers to pay for that?
We will be charging for the English language tests and for the safeguarding tests. The training aspect of it, I will get back to you on that. Obviously, if applicants already hold licences with this authority, then we need to be potentially providing that training for free. So the Department for Transport actually recently issued statutory guidance to licensing authorities, and I'm pretty sure actually that guidance means that we now have to provide safeguarding training to all of our licensee holders every 12 months. So for the tests, yes, we will be charging. At the moment, I don't believe that we charge for the training, but I will get back to you on that, Councillor Shepherd, just to make sure, because I wouldn't want to be accused of misleading the council.
Any further questions for Cabinet members? Councillor Clark.
Not sure where it sits actually. It's part of the report, but I would like to hear the Cabinet member's response in relation to an issue. And and I'm not sure how, we've only got 20 minutes for cabinet members. I'm not sure whether they're leaving or whether they're staying, so I think I probably need to ask my question now, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Let's see how it goes.
It starts on Appendix 8 of the report, relating to FOI requests, complaints, 20-day target, and the complaints 10-day targets. And then there is further papers at Appendix D, outlining the number of FOI requests and complaints received. In the FOI requests, there were 183, then we're looking back at last year here, by the way, Chair. There were 183 late responses, and there are currently 55 outstanding. In the complaints, out of 824, there were 229 late responses, with 19 outstanding, I believe. My question is, first of all, has this been investigated? But my question to the portfolio holder is, what is being done to address this number of complaints and outstanding issues? I mean, we're looking at 28% in relation to FOIs and 28.5% FOIs and 27.8% in relation to complaints. So I'm wanting to know what actions the council are taking or the cabinet are taking in relation to these issues.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'm aware this is going to come up as a separate item, but while we've got the cabinet members here, do any of you feel able to take this on an ad hoc answer?
In terms of, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of to find exactly when the report is presented, to find out exactly if you have specific queries about it. In terms of the policy response, as I telegraphed at Cabinet 2 weeks ago, corporate governance improvement is very much on the radar of this administration. And in terms of, specifically in terms of customer services, I know I've made recommendations to the chairman of this committee. What is required, because it's not just in terms of FOI complaints, it's in terms of response rate across the piece. The feedback from the residents is not always in accord necessarily with the feedback from the numbers, from the KPIs. So what I would suggest to the chairman of the committee is that, because OSPs are policy think tanks in effect, is that if a member of the committee wants to put it on your work programme, that there's a proper deep dive done into customer service in terms of the KPIs, the systems that are used and the processes that the department uses, and that then you feed into the cabinet process and policy response to that. If the committee doesn't want to do it, we'll have to do it within the cabinet and we'll raise the reports that way. But that seems to me the best way forward on that issue. So I hope that answers the question as a way forward for us.
Councillor Clark, does that answer your question?
It answers that part of the question, thank you, Chair. I do have another question as well. It's a little bit concerned to hear potentially of a reduction in staff in the museum. I wonder if the portfolio holder can tell me, are there any, is there any substance to those reports, or are we still maintaining our services fully at Nuneaton's museum, Nuneaton and Bedworth Museum, which is obviously based in Riversley Park? Do
you respond to that?
Yes, I am in a position to answer that question, Chair. I think I know what Councillor Clark is referring to in terms of the social media post from a councillor who I won't name. I am disappointed that councillor decided to take to social media to make certain threats against council staff. I can put on public record here today that we have no plans to cut staff at the moment at the museum. Indeed, recently we've actually gone out to recruit 2 additional members of staff. If I can use this as an opportunity, Chair, to say, if councillors decide to take to social media to try and allege that certain members of staff are going to be sacked or made redundant, I would be most grateful if that councillor could give me a heads up first, because I would like to go to those council officers to reassure them beforehand that there are absolutely no plans whatsoever. Like I say, I'm very disappointed to have seen that social media post in question, and I hope that councillors will rethink before posting those sorts of comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Cabinet? Councillor Condacon.
Partnership. Are we looking at actually forming a partnership, joint authority or something, if all the authorities are going to have the same collection system? At the moment we've got 6 waste authorities in Warwickshire, and if we're all working for a MRF, there was talk of saving several £1 million by actually having a common waste authority. So if the Cabinet member can either tell us if we're progressing with that or if it's still being discussed. Thank you.
Councils in the area does work constructively with neighbouring authorities when it comes to refuse, recycling and waste. We are members of the Warwickshire Waste Partnership. I am attending that meeting next week. The agenda for that has been published onto the County Council's website, so if any member of the council wishes me to raise any points at that meeting, please do let me know. As I think your question is about a joint waste authority, I'm not aware that's on the cards. I certainly haven't been briefed about that, if that is the case. But obviously, if there were plans to do that, I would need to look at the merits of doing that before making a decision on behalf of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any member? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming, thank you for your answers, and obviously if you wish to stay, that's your decision. Okay, we can move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Integrated Performance Report, 4th quarter 2021. Presenting this? Please, yes, Director Richardson, if you'd like to present the report, that's great.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is, for those members who are new to the Council, let alone the panel, this is a fairly standard report that comes to overview and scrutiny panels on a quarterly basis. It gives an outturned report for members. It gives members an opportunity to have a look and see what's going on. It does, as I think Councillor Clark and Councillor Croft has indicated, gives members the opportunity to consider whether there's anything they want to do a deep dive into, and that can then form part of your work programme going forward. So that's something that you can do when you get to the work programme item, is to consider other issues that you want to look at as a panel. You could set up a select committee or a working party, and away you go. In terms of the report before you today, obviously it's you've got the addendum with the, if you like, the performance elements to it, and that sets out our standard. That's a standard format that we use. I will go to that in a moment. In addition, as Councillor Clark's already pointed out, you also have the strategic risk register attached to your agenda. And then there is the report that goes into the details about complaints and FOIs, etc., which you've heard about. The one thing I would flag for you as a panel is, in terms of the report, there is a section of the report which I routinely draw to your attention, and it is purely because we get asked this question every 3 years by the Office of the Surveillance Commissioner, who's actually changed his title now, but and section 3 of the report on page 19, that sets out the arrangements or the report as to whether or not any covert surveillance has been undertaken by the Council, and as you'll see there, that there has been no covert surveillance undertaken by the Council. As a general rule, we would report it to you if we had. If I can just And I'm going to also, if I can introduce Craig Pugh, who's the head of finance, who is sitting on the far side of the chair. Craig is, as head of finance, can deal with any issues in connection with the budget numbers that you have before you. You will see the way that this report is presented, that there are certain items, certainly on page 3, that are in bold. Those will tend to be the ones that are there to draw your eye and to draw your attention in case there's anything you want to explore in connection with that. It usually means there's quite a significant variance against performance. Beyond that, Chair, I'd hope that members have had the opportunity to go through the report. Just to say that for each element from the table on page 3, there's then some charts which go into a bit more detail about those individual services. There is a comments section and a trend indicator, and we have gone for the sort of the three-pronged smiley approach. It's either going to be positive, in which case it's a smile. If it's effectively neutral, it's neither. And then if it's a negative position, it will be the frown. So you'll see that for example, on page 7 at the top, you've got a smiley, and then above that on page 6, you've got a frown. So that would suggest those are areas of concern that you may want to consider. Obviously, we're still coming through the pandemic, so I'm pretty certain that some of the indicators will be as a result of that. But, Chair, unless members have any specific questions of either Craig or I, we will either endeavour to answer them now, or if we can't, we'll take those questions away and we'll speak with the relevant directors of those services and try and get an answer back to you as a panel. So we'll circulate the answers to all members, Chair.
Thank you for that presentation. Well, the panel is asked to scrutinise the performance information contained in the report and to make any recommendations to the relevant Cabinet portfolio holder. So I've got Councillor Clark's indicated to speak. So,
just 2 points actually. One in relation to RIPA, and it's fortunate that we've got the chairman, the cabinet member here for waste. Could you identify if the covert surveillance could be used in relation to fly tipping instances and things like that? Is that possible? And you mentioned it hasn't been done recently, but could it and should it have been done?
point if you're able.
I'm not. I think one of the things I would say is that the law was changed, oh gosh, in about 2008, 9, maybe 10, to take a number of offences out of RIPA. And I'm trying to remember whether fly tipping is now outside of the scope of RIPA, or that doesn't necessarily mean we can't do covert surveillance, but it wouldn't be caught by RIPA. We'd have to do something else, but certainly it's something I'd have to check, and because it depends upon the level of penalty of the offence. So if it's a fine only, then you cannot use RIPA for that. I think it has to be an offence of 6 months or more for RIPA to apply. So. But with fly tipping, there are slightly different offences that you can use, and some you could use RIPA for, and some you couldn't. It depends which section or which bit of legislation you're using as to whether or not you could.
Purely at age, it mentions 2029 to 20. Should that be 2019 to 20? That's page 7. I'm sure that's. I think if we can get that. Thank you.
Correct. Can we have that amended? And similarly, could I ask that the front page of the item that contains Appendix A, it's missed Councillor Harbison, officer.
Yes, Chair, I've made a note of that.
If we can get that correct, please, that's really useful. Councillor Kenno?
Thank you, Chair. I've got freedom of information request in the appendix and contained within the agenda. I saw one freedom of information request, it took 218 days before it was responded to, and there's one still ongoing for 209 days. I'm just wondering, are there any possible legal ramifications for being so late to respond to a freedom of information request? Thank you.
Potentially, yes, Chair, but if I can put it in these terms, the procedure or the process would be that if the legislation says we should respond within 20 working days of a request. If we don't, then, of course, the person that's made the request can make a complaint to the Information Commissioner. The first thing the Information Commissioner does is contact the council and say, you've not responded to that, would you please respond to it now? And then it would get picked up at that point. What does happen, Chair, and perhaps a deep dive might be a good idea for you to see this, we get an awful lot of FOIs from reporters doing a general trawl of the country. Sometimes it's of Europe, sometimes it's broader than that, and therefore, in the great scheme of things, if they don't get a response, they're not too fussed about it because they will have had a response sufficient for them to do the article or whatever it is that they were doing. So in those circumstances, Chair, they don't follow it up with the Information Commissioner. So, I mean, the simple reality is we're supposed to do them within 20 days, and that's what we should be seeking to do. But I do know, and I'm sure Craig will confirm, we do get some rather weird and wonderful requests, which require a fair bit of analysis in some cases. Just to add to that, Chair, and if I can just make this point, when you're looking at the data, the one thing you have to be aware of is that within the legislation you can extend the time period by agreement. And it's conceivable that in some instances, in the cases that you've got before you, the applicant will have been informed that the information they're requiring is complex or requires a bit of time to compile, and therefore, in those circumstances, we ask for more time. That won't necessarily show on your report, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's late, because if the applicant agrees to that, then obviously that's done by agreement.
Councillor Kenno, did you want to comment further on that?
So, Director Richardson, just to come back on a point, have there been any instances of people going to the Information Commissioner due to a late freedom of information request that has led to any judgment from the OCO? Thank you.
Chair, we've I have to say, we've never had a case that's gone to the Information Tribunal, which is where it would end up. So, no.
Before I come to Councillor Condacor, who I think is next indicated to speak, could I just ask that on the point that was made about where perhaps the applicant has agreed that we'll extend it, do we perhaps want to mark that in the report in future so members could be aware that although the timescale has exceeded the initial permitted amount, it is by agreement, and therefore, whilst it's a technical breach of the period, not an actual breach in the sense of all pragmatic purposes, because everybody's aware of what's happening and is in agreement. Councillor Condaka.
All as one, or shall I come back each one? Because they're quite diverse. Okay, the first one, it mentions the average time for planning applications. And we have the top farm planning application, which has been put in 2017. So that is now about 1,200 days. waiting to be determined. Does this actually figure include applications that are waiting but are still yet to be determined? Because I know we had a problem with our stats in the past where if you haven't actually yet determined it, it doesn't actually count in the average because it's the average time taken for determination. So this 1,200 days for Top Farm, will that actually wreck this performance statistic?
Don't know, Chair. I'd have to come back to you on that. I don't know whether or at what point the Top Farm application is, whether it's actually been validated or, you know, whether it would count towards this or not. But I would expect if it had been validated, then it should be in there. But I honestly don't know. I'd have to come back to you on that, Chair.
Do you want to come with your next question, Councillor?
Yeah, my next for years, in here it says we've still got £230,000 of fire safety work in the housing capital budget outstanding. And we kept getting promises that this work was going to be done by this summer, this quarter, this end of financial year. So does anyone know from finance or housing? Yeah, we've still got a £250,000 of housing fire safety work to do. That's slippage. Is that correct?
Yes, it is going to slip into next financial year, and part of the reason for that was the inability to actually get access due to COVID restrictions to actually do the fire safety works in these properties. And I'm aware that there was also issues in actually obtaining the fire doors due to supply chain issues, but I'm aware that these have been addressed now, so hopefully to get this completed as soon as possible in this new financial year.
And your next question.
Thank you. My next one is the Civic Hall. Provisional outturn is £765,000 for the Civic Hall, and it's had absolutely no shows, and we've obviously got income from it being a vaccination centre. So can I simply ask, how on earth has the Civic Hall cost £765,000 last year, which is actually £3,000 more than when it was opened?
I haven't got the actual breakdown to hand, but I can quite happily present that to the panel via email at a later point, give a breakdown of what the costs are. Some of it will be recharges, because support service recharges are still attributed to the Civic Hall, even though it has been closed, because it's being used as a vaccination centre, etc. And there will still be some limited utility and NDR costs, which, yeah, there will be some fixed costs in there. So I will provide a breakdown to the panel if that's okay, Chair.
That's fine with me, yes, thank you.
And my final question is about the risk, which is building a hotel. Obviously, we can't talk about the financial details of our hotel, but an identical looking one in Stockton was built at a cost of £17 million, and they had to write off several £1 million of that because obviously it was trading less well than expected. Why isn't the hotel in the risk register if we're going to be spending that order of magnitude of money on it? And obviously there's been a massive construction cost increase, inflation in the last year. So actually the risk of the hotel being over budget is already quite considerable. So I'd really like to see why it isn't in the risk register as a major sort of £17–20 million project. Thank you, Chair.
Well, Chair, we will have to come back on that. I do know, because I know Councillor Kandaka raised this at the last meeting, and there, we have confirmed that there are separate project risk registers that run alongside. There's also a fairly detailed piece of work that has to be done to satisfy government in terms of funding. So there's a number of checks and balances already in place. I will raise it though, Chair, with Dawn Dawson, who's effectively the sponsoring director. I'm sure she'll want to raise it with Councillor Wilson, who is here and may be able to add some further detail to that. But I do know that there is a number of safeguards in place that to protect the council's interests.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, if you'd like to add to that?
I'm not supposed to be at this one, but I thought I'd drop in anyway. I can actually provide an update that today I have given authority to the executive directors to sign the memorandum of understanding between the council and MHCLG about the Future High Streets Fund, which includes some money for the Abbey Street development. They'll be taking that under a delegated decision, but they have my authority to do so. And as part of that paperwork, there is an entire risk register which has to be supplied to MHCLG. And I have indeed read that today, and it includes, I think there's between 40 and 50 lines on there, potential risks, which encompass not just the hotel, but the other schemes in there, like Bridge to Living, etc. But they are quite detailed, they have been rated, and there are proposed and future mitigations which have been agreed with MHCLG and are being monitored by designated officers. Indeed, Craig is allocated to a number of those as the responsible owners for those things. But I would agree that in terms of the overall council risk register, if the committee were minded to want to incorporate that as a specific risk, then I wouldn't have any objections to it being put on the corporate risk register. I think it would probably be wise, given that we've had other issues on the risk register in recent history, that as a corporate entity, the council should incorporate that in its corporate risk assessment. But I can assure Councillor Condacor that there is a wider risk assessment which has to be signed off by MHCLG and has been looked at by their senior directors and officials as well.
We've had an offer there. Do we wish to add this as a specific risk to the risk register? I'm happy to take a show of hands on that.
Okay, I'm going to say I propose that we do, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's agreed. Thank you. Councillor Beetham.
This is in regards to Appendix D, which is the Freedom of Information requests that Councillor Kenyak rose earlier. Given that the targets, as you said, are 20 days, 20 working days, has there been a report done for the main causes of these to be overdue? I know you mentioned that you get a lot from the media, but has the analysis that we've got is mostly just the figures? There's no deep dive into the causes of the delay. So I was wondering if you have a more specific knowledge of the perhaps breakdown of causes of the delays, or if there's how many communications and agreed delays there are. If not, then I would suggest a report to be made on that basis.
I can't answer the specifics, Chair. I don't suppose Craig would know either, so we'd have to come back to you. I do know that Chris Tideman, who was the Director for Customer Services, did do a detailed analysis at some point in time. Obviously, Chris is now retired, and there is a new director starting next week who I'm sure will be more than happy to undertake that exercise, because it will give him an opportunity to have a look and see the state of affairs and get a handle on things and see what needs to improve. So it's certainly something, Chair, that could be picked up, but I can certainly see if we've got access to the report that was done previously.
Thank you. Councillor Beetham, if I heard you correctly, was that a formal proposal you were making? All right. Would you like to just repeat your proposal so that we can hear it again, please?
So I propose that a report to be created in regards to the Freedom of Information request from 2019 to 2020, including all requests currently open and all requests since that period.
Does that find a seconder at all? Let's hear it.
Councillor Beetham, I think it may be worth, rather than just focusing on the Freedom of Information requests, it may be worth looking into the causes of delays to complaints as well, because they're pretty severe, if not about the same length. So it might be worth looking at Freedom of Information requests and the complaints that haven't received a response. Thank you.
More than happy, yeah.
Director Richardson, I'm not entirely clear. Have you got an idea of what it is we're going to be looking at? So we've got it for
Well,
the record.
if I understand correctly, Chair, I think we're being asked to prepare a report on FOI requests between 2019 and 2020, including any open and requests that we've received since the end of 2020, so up to now, basically. I think Councillor Keno is also asking us to do a similar exercise for complaints, particularly the outstanding complaints, really to examine reasons for delay and any related issues as far as why weren't they responded to within these prescribed time limit. And of course, Chair, we can pick up the point around your suggestion around the those that have been agreed more time. So we can pick that up at the same time, Chair.
Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much. Regulations. There are other requests that aren't called freedom of information requests, but go through the same process. So I think we should make sure we capture those as well, because there's two flavours of freedom of information requests, and also the personal people data can be requested with subject access requests. So so these are the two categories which, if we're looking at it, we should actually try and capture the three flavours of requests for information, not just the ones that are actually legally freedom of information requests. Thank you, Chair.
To incorporate this, I've got quite a complex recommendation for a report. Does that find a second, Councillor Keno? In which case, I'm assuming there's no dissent on this, but show of hands would do. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Councillor Shepherd.
Page 3 and 4, under the headings, it says other services, and there's amounts attributed to the other services. So for myself, I would want to know what those other services are. So I don't know whether it's an email out to members, say, included under this heading is. Because some of them have got little figures against them, but some of them further down are quite large amounts of money.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm quite happy to present that. The reason this was done originally was at the request of previous OSP, was otherwise it was going to be far too long because there are a number of other services and they were the small areas, but I can appreciate that in some of these they've got some larger numbers, so I can provide the full breakdown if that's okay with the panel.
Moving on to agenda item 8 then, the work programme suggestion form.
Obviously, Chair, and it's something that I think those members who attended the training with Dave McKenna the other night will have appreciated. Obviously, a lot of the work of overview and scrutiny will come from the members themselves, putting forward work programme suggestions, which will come forward to the panel for consideration. And from that, you may want to then consider whether you want to do a select committee or a working party. This particular item, Chair, is it's actually come from a member of the public, Mr. Margrave, and it is a request to consider setting up some form of honours committee. The suggestion is sort of fairly self-evident from the content. So it's really for the scrutiny panel to decide: do you want to look into this? Do you want to do this? And if so, then obviously you can then decide to add it to your work programme. You'll need to decide how you want to approach it, what you want to do, if you do, and when, and then decide who's going to do it as well. So it's really open to the panel, Chair.
Thank you, Director Richardson. With that, I will actually open this to the panel. Councillor Clark.
We are fortunate in Nuneaton and Bedworth that we have a lot of people who serve our borough well and freely and voluntarily. I think it's something that has some merit to it, most definitely. I know that the leader of the council is particularly interested in looking at this, and I think he has actually mentioned something of a similar nature. But what I would possibly suggest that a way forward on this is, if we are to look at this, whether it's for this group to set it up or whether it should be a cabinet ad hoc basis on the basis that nominations are sent to the council, or whether we look at this separately and then move it on to cabinet. But I think that's something that we should be looking at to recognise the benefit and the resilience and the efforts that the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth put in to help not only themselves, the businesses, but also everyone else and their neighbours. So I think that it does have merit, and it's something we should be looking at, Chair.
Councillor Beetham.
Thank you. So we all know people in our residence who contribute that little bit more, little bit extra than what's expected of them, those who show that civic pride in where they live, where they work, and there is great merit to there to be recognition for it, whereas perhaps there's only been a social media post of applause from other residents. I believe a further recognition is needed in the form of what that is yet. I believe we'll be looking at it, and I know that the leader has considered options as well, so we'll see what is to come.
Thank you, Councillor. As we've got the leader here, and he has indicated, I believe, did you indicate, Councillor Wilson?
I did, but it's Sam's portfolio, so I'm happy for Sam to answer.
Okay, Councillor Croft, if you'd like to come in at this point. I know it's a little bit irregular, but as we have you here, and we have the benefit of somebody who can give us the answer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Just acquaint the committee with the fact that this is, as Councillor Clark indicates, very much on this administration's agenda. We do want, as part of our theme of civic pride, to really push the angle of civic honours, and I know the leader and Mr. Mayor are very excited to do that. I will just acquaint, and because of that, I will just acquaint the committee with the fact that the Cabinet intend to push this come what may. So whether, if the committee doesn't take it up, we'd like to bring that to Cabinet sooner. If you do take it up, it will probably delay the process. So whichever you decide, because obviously I can't as a Cabinet member direct this committee, there will be a report coming to Cabinet to establish a Civic Honours Committee, probably as a subcommittee of Cabinet in due course. So I just wanted to make the committee aware of that fact, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
I have Councillor Condacor next to speak.
But it's probably better the Cabinet have a proposal rather than us talk about what might happen. So it probably is good to start with Cabinet and then go to scrutiny later rather than take it this way. But the other thing I wanted to mention is we had the Lord Lieutenant come here about 3 or 4 years ago to have, it was actually an event in the council house, but it actually was paid for by the Lord Lieutenant to try and drum up support for people nominating people for honours. And I think the Lord Lieutenant needs to be a big part of what's going forward, and maybe part of the Cabinet's plans might be to invite him for either an annual or biannual sort of event to sort of explain how the honours system works. And it was a very good event, and I think maybe a repeat of that might be a useful part of a review of how we get more people recognised in the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Shepherd, I had next.
It sounds that the Cabinet are going to plough ahead with it, regardless of what OSP decides anyway, by the sound of what Councillor Croft has just said anyway. But, you know, I think we're doing a bit of a disservice here to Carver, who actually do volunteer awards, support the community, and I think, you know, suddenly saying we're going to do it, I think is a little bit disingenuous. to be honest. When I was the mayor in 2016-17, I gave out community awards. We've got community medals to community groups along the borough, and every mayor, as far as I'm aware, has done that for several years. So I was surprised that there was a comment in here from Mr Margrave saying about setting up community service awards, when actually that already takes place, or did up until the elections. So I am a little surprised. Happy that Councillor Condacor has mentioned the Lord Lieutenant, because actually I was the mayor when he came along to explain the honour systems to people and how they work, and actually it was a very good event. But you know, if cabinets are happy to plough ahead with it, I don't see the point of this OSP doing the work that, you know, they're going to be doing anyway. But I think, you know, to not include or even mention Carver, I think, is a bit of an oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, indicated.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think it's right, and as identified, there are a number of bodies that do or have done this in the past and recognise the benefits that the members of the public have given to the borough. I think it's right also that we actually leave it to the Cabinet to set up a meeting, to set up either a task and finish group or whatever committee they feel is appropriate. Hopefully they will recognise the comments that have been said here today, and also will include some backbenchers in relation to that, because obviously we need a broad aspect across the borough to ensure that any nominations that come forward are recognised, and hopefully I welcome the impetus of the Cabinet's recognition of this. So I'd move that we let the Cabinet get onto this first, and then we can look at it later, Chair. Thank you.
For your comments, did you formally move that, did you say?
Do I need to move that? Yeah, I will do.
Second, Councillor Beetham, that's fantastic. Is everybody happy then that we allow Cabinet to come forward with proposals to formalise, relaunch, whatever we want to call it, take into account that things might have been done on an ad hoc basis in the past, and that we do allow you to come forward with proposals which can come for scrutiny?
I think we asked.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just backbenchers in it, whatever's formed, so it's actually a broad church, the honours review system we have. Thank you.
Croft, are you happy to take that on board?
Happy to take any comments.
Thank you. In which case,
I do want to amend that slightly, that it's representative of the political balance as well, please.
of course. Everybody happy with that? All those in favour then? Okay, any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. In which case that's carried. Moving on then to the forward plan.
Yes, Chair, the forward plan is brought to all panels. It's an opportunity to advise the panel members of what's on the forward plan. The forward plan is a forward-looking plan that it's got a time horizon of usually 4 months in terms of what goes on there. If we can get more on, we will try to do so, and in some cases we'll put things on that we're not quite sure about. So it might be moved on and on until we finally get to the point where it goes to Cabinet. It is executive decisions that go on the forward plan, and in terms of the content, it's an opportunity for you as an overview and scrutiny panel to look and see what's coming up. It gives you an opportunity to decide whether you want to actually request any of these items to come to the panel first, so you can scrutinise, pre-scrutiny, I guess is what they call it, so you can look at things in advance of it going to Cabinet, if you so request. But it's also an opportunity just to get a feel for what's going on, so that you could, you know, if there's an opportunity to do a little bit of deep diving on an issue, it gives you some forward warning of that, so you can build that into your work programme. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. The forward plan is very useful. Not on here is the acceleration of the borough plan process, but one thing I would like the Director to explain is on the bottom of page 117, it's been overprinted. It says charging for vacant plots on mobile homes. Maybe if the Director could explain what it is, we would then know if we wanted to ask, find out more about it or not, because how on earth do you charge and who on earth are you charging for vacant plots? Thank you, Chair.
I have no idea, Chair. It's one that I'd have to ask. I think it's obviously something from Dawn Dawson, so I'll have to ask Dawn to provide an explanation for that.
Councillor Evans, so you indicated you've got an answer for this. Or?
Acceleration of the borough plan. The forward plan tends primarily to put forward to OSP what is likely to come forward to Cabinet. The necessary work for the acceleration of the borough plan has already gone through Cabinet and yesterday through the local plan committee. That's why it's not included.
Councillor Clark.
Clarification, because there's a number of items on here that are June 2021. Obviously, we haven't had opportunity to look at any of those other than outside of independently sort of thing, but as a committee, this committee hasn't had a chance to look at those, and I think my understanding is that is this for the committee to consider? Just if you can clarify that for me, please.
I think it's
Sorry.
timing. I do know that a number of these reports will not be coming to the Cabinet on the 23rd, I think it is, the next Cabinet. So they will be, as I said before, they will go on to the forward plan and then just be rolled forward. So there will be an opportunity to look at some of those specific items that are on there. The ones that I can say for certain will be on the next Cabinet report are the ones for the adoption of the Health Impact Assessment Supplementary Planning Document and the adoption of Open Space and Green Infrastructure Supplementary Planning Document. And I do know that there will be a General Fund Housing Revenue Account report. I don't know whether it will be the outturn report, but I know there will be a finance report on there as well.
Thank you, Councillor. With a comment you want to make?
Just a quick one. Are the others being deferred for further consideration, and will we have opportunity at a later date?
Yes, Chair. Those that are deferred will move into either July, they may be moved beyond July. So if you as a panel wanted to consider something that's on the forward plan, you could request it and we would bring it to the next meeting.
In which case I would suggest you get those requests in PDQ. Councillor Shepherd.
These items on the forward plan belong to other OSP committees, so it would be helpful maybe to have a decide which OSP committee they belong to, because obviously there's a housing and environment OSP, so I presume that's where, you know, possibly the mobile homes might go to, the housing revenue account will go to, so I think it would be useful to know which ones belong into this committee and into the other two.
Councillor Evans.
Comment. Yes, I do accept that it's regrettable that OSP can't necessarily request to scrutinise those things before they go to Cabinet, but in relation to those three items that are going forward to Cabinet, I'm sure two of them would be open to the Council's call-in procedures. So I would remind OSP of your rights as per the Council's constitution to call in certain Cabinet items. But yeah.
anyone else wish to speak on this? In which case, I think the recommendation is that this is noted, and therefore duly noted.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. I have no notice of any other items for any of the business. So with that, I think we can declare the meeting closed. Thank you one and all for your attention, your attendance and your contributions. Thank you.